what they do is there is a provision when you get a U.S. passport so you can go anywhere. If you give up your U.S. citizenship and I want to be not here, I'm going to be, Edward Snowden, Russia, whatever. Yeah. They're like, they don't want you to give up your citizenship unless you have another plantation that owns you. You know?
Exactly.
Now, you can't just be free and just be out there. Now, when they did the United Nations and there was a lot of countries changing, all of a sudden you didn't have that country or it didn't exist anymore, and all kinds of weird stuff was going on after redrawing the maps. The United Nations gave you could be a world citizen, which is what they want anyway, So what happened is they had this world citizen thing, or world UN documented person of I don't belong to anybody. They did this with an actual document that he has, and we went through, and that was interesting. But what they're doing in New Hampshire is, and anybody else that wants to do it, I guess, but they're always talking about it, and a lot of the guys are doing it, and even out of New Hampshire, up in New England, what they do is when you do gosh darn it, I gotta give you a little bit of background. I can do this in 2 minutes, and nobody interrupts me. All right. What they did in 2006, 7, around in there, I think it was right before or right when the Levolution first started, there was a couple, he was a dentist in New Hampshire that didn't think I don't owe you taxes, you guys suck, and your alliance tax is snot, and I'm not doing it. Yeah. So they were saying, we're not under your thing. A lot of the people, guys, I don't claim to be, I'm not looking for any benefits from you, bite me, I'm this, I'm not paying taxes. So then they get to court, and they go, oh, you're not a U.S. citizen? Well, under penalty of perjury to get your passport, it says, right, I am a U.S. Absolutely, yes, I am. And here, isn't that your signature? Well, you said that under penalty of perjury that you are a U.S. citizen. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Tax evasion, you're going to jail. Yeah. So everybody's going, ooh, don't do that, So when to get a passport, a lot of people, they couldn't travel. They couldn't go to Mexico. They couldn't go to a friend's wedding in Canada. They couldn't travel to Europe. So they're going, man, this sucks, So what they did is they go ahead and do the passport thing. Then there's a provision in there that they already have case law and admitted, yada, 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 that you go, like you say, to the United States Secretary of State, and you do what's an addendum to your application that you did your passport. And you go, yes, I filled out this under these conditions, and I rescind, and they accept it. They go, okay.
They have to, yeah.
Right, they go,
law, yeah.
Damn it.
Because they
another one caught us,
They coded the republic with the corporation, so you can invoke essentially your citizenship is in the republic rather than in the corporation, and there's nothing they can do because they haven't been able to dissolve the republic.
All right, more information.
Yeah.
Bob and I went through this in the mid-'90s. There was a stamp that they used to sell at the Arizona Breakfast Club and so on. A lot of these guys had it, and it said UCC 17 whatever the hell it was, and rights reserved. Boom. Every time you signed any document, you would do that. If you look at I'll show you, driver's license. I go in there, and I did this in the mid-'90s. Well, then the Attorney General in Arizona, it became so bad that people were going to the Department of Motor Vehicles and signing Ernest Rights Reserved Hancock. And they go, damn it, you get a traffic ticket because it was a civil violation. I didn't contract with you guys. Oh, yes, you did, because in Arizona, you kind of look at your driver's license. See, right here, you signed, and all the I totally agreed verbiage of whatever. It's like signing an iTunes contract, And you go in there, I totally agree to abide by the civil blah, 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 if you rule me, okay? Unless, if they're municipal corporations, and this corporation thing, and the Inc., United States of America Inc. kind of deal, they have Universal Commercial Code. Yep. And UCC, there's a provision they can't force you into a third-party contract, 13th Amendment, involuntary slavery kind of thing, right? Yep. So the UCC gives you an out. Yep. They can't do it unless everything's about Yeah, totally agreed. You volunteered.
Yep.
I don't volunteer to pay income tax. You volunteered after this here gun was to your head, and you volunteered. I mean, you know, it's all just all this voluntary.
There's not a law either about the income tax. They ratified it in the 26th Amendment of the Constitution, saying that they're allowed to put an income tax up, but there's not actually any statutes for the income tax. Like, it's a voluntary reporting system where you volunteer.
Which it had to be for them to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then when they go, you say, I don't want to be inside your corporate HOA of whatever the hell, right? So you go, to get out of that, you go rights reserved. Yeah, I know the game. I say the words, I wrote it down between my name, I sign it, boom, done. I did this in the mid-90s, and when they first had it to where it was good until you were 60 or something. Well, my license was so beat up and taped together, and kind of they're like, I don't know if we're going to use this anymore. So I did have a passport, because we going out of the country some of the time then. And then I go, okay, well, now they have, the Department of Motor Vehicles doesn't have to give you a license anymore. They got these, you know, like title, registration, you know.
Third-party contractors.
Yeah, you know, the strip mall, whatever the hell people, right? So you can go in there, get your license too, which is cool because you don't have all these lines and everything, free market. I go in, okay, now that they're not down there, because the Attorney General in Arizona in the mid-90s, this was being used so much and successful, they go to traffic court for running a stop sign or whatever it was, and they go, well, I'm not under your thing. They go, oh yeah, it's license, it's rights reserved. Damn it. And they let them go. And I go, wow. Well, this became a thing to the point that they started having what they call patriot judges. They'd have these judges that would come in and, Constitution doesn't mean anything in my courtroom. That's where that came from. These guys, you can sling that around all you want. I don't care. Guilty, guilty, guilty. So that became a thing. Well, finally, the Attorney General's office goes to the Department of Motor Vehicles and says, you shall not accept any more driver's license applications that have that on it.
Rights reserved.
Okay?
Yeah.
Rights reserved. You can't do it because I say you can't do it. So when they went to this, off-track betting Department Motor Vehicle thing, I just go in, they didn't care. It was like, yeah, whatever, and they process it. So that's what you see.
Does yours
small
say it?
type in there, Ernie Rights Reserved Hancock. Okay? And, yeah, the small, but in the actual document, you can read it.
Where's the rights reserved in your signature?
Yeah, it's in the signature. Yeah, put it right in there, kind of thing. Now, if you go look at the actual document, you can read it. I mean, it's hard to read there, but
yeah, I see it.
So when you do that, all of a sudden that's supposed to get you out of Dodge or something, get you out of jail free.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not expecting it because I don't care. But I'm not voluntarily signing into anything if I don't have to. So that's why I do it.
Yeah.
Now, when you do that at the federal level, there is a mechanism by which you can go through that, and the guy's name is Chris Gronsky out of New Hampshire, that a lot of the guys, Free State guys, they all know who he is, that he goes through this process that you claim your rights, so then you're a citizen of the state, not of the United States, of which this is a federated, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you get to do what you want to do anyway, but you kind of snuck it by them, Yeah. So all this stuff is true. I've been through this over the decades. Bob and I have been, these guys, but I'm like, yeah, I've gone down with a guy, be a witness for them filing in the recorder of the county of the yada, yada, yada. We've done, our intent to carry concealed documents that we've done with before it was legal. We just didn't care. We were outside of there and we did blah, blah, blah. Done it. They don't give a crap. There's going to be some guy with a gun's going to explain it to you.
It matters not. He is your king.
That's exactly it. It matters not. Okay. So, when I talked to Philip, I preface this because this Declaration of Decentralization thing, it's cool to have it written down. What this is about. Now, the reason he gave, everything is private membership associations.
Yep.
We really started pushing that.
Yep.
We had it at the front page of our latest newspaper. We talked to people about it. We do it. It's kind of cool. And I saw during the pandemic or whatever it was, that a lot of the restaurants or gyms or people that were open, they went private membership association. We're a private club outside of, suck it and we can do what we want. Yep. So now a lot of people are learning this. They're prepping for the next one. There's always going to be a next one. It worked once, worked 400 times. So they're getting ready for this. And Philip was making the argument that if you have a declaration, something that you've signed, and you're being more selective, because in the private membership association precedents and law is that if you have selectivity,
You
it's
have
not
to
just
have reasonable discernment in membership, otherwise it can be considered a public organization.
exactly.
Yep.
So by having this, declaration, now you're kind of getting
Beginning of the membership agreement.
exactly.
Yep.
So I go, all right, this is stuff to know. Well, you do it or not, and not even really the point. It's like everybody takes all this information in, they do what they're going to do. It's better than not. So I'm going, okay, this is cool. And I like Philip. He seemed like a cool guy.
He is a good guy.
And he's, working inside your, thing. Now, then we got to talk about, and this is why I wanted to talk to you. And you just happen to be able to come out in the desert, and it's cool. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully if you're around in the morning early, are you going to go back tonight? Or what did you bring? What vehicle did you bring?
Just brought the Volvo. I didn't bring the van.
Okay. Well, I got a couch right there.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes, man.
Well, we'll see what happens. How recreated we get at the fire. So what happens is you go out to where the land that we are, like you see it, and you just go, ooh.
Yeah.
Now I was talking to Philip. I'm going, all right. It's all about the social structure.
Yeah.
It's I don't really want you as my neighbor. I didn't want you. Oh, we'll help you. I go, maybe you will, maybe you won't. Maybe what is my condition by which I have somebody get intimately? Do I got to share a meal with every single person that comes and helps? Do I got to give up my farmer's daughter? I mean, do I got my dog is your dog? I mean, you break the my backhoe, and who fixes it? I mean, it's just. How selective are you? Can you be? Should you be? And then what's conflict resolution?
Yep.
What do I have to do? What can't I do? What's your conflict resolution?
Yep.
And that is where you come in with your social stack that you've talked a lot about
Yep.
of Nexus IO.
Yep.
So Nexus, I need you to describe for the audience what it is, and from originally what you had done, even though I didn't really understand what you were saying, but it was a pretty consistent track that you were going on to create a social structure that self-governed. It was kind of a structure that just kind of worked on its own. It was like a blockchain currency that, voted up and down the wisdom of the crowd kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was only after time passed that I really started to see what you were doing.
Yeah.
You were creating a forever structure of community, of thought around the planet, of whatever, and that's dangerous as hell. Mm-hmm. I mean, the man don't like that. We want a one-world government, but one that we control, not a one-world government that governs themselves.
Yeah.
That's not. So go ahead with that preface. Explain to me the evolution, the thought process that went into it, how far along you've gotten, because you keep adding on more. Every time I talk to you, it's further and further along, and how far you are. But I had this conversation, preface Ernie yakking for too long, is that you guys kind of get an idea of why this is important and how it's going to feed into the future of abandoning this crap now. When I first started doing radio, people would call it, "What are you, an anarchist?" And I'm like, compared to what? What we got now? Is this my choice? This or none? I vote none, okay? Because this sucks, whatever it is. Yeah. So, and it's not working. Yeah. So go ahead, pick it up from there, start from the beginning what the plan was, all the iterations, and where you are now. Colin Cantrell, Ernie, be quiet, go.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just, Nexus, began just by looking at the Bitcoin code, finding issues with it, the story, improved it. Started. As a coder, it's kind of interesting. Like, your code is kind of somewhat of a map of your mind. Like, you can tell the way you think is evidenced with how you code. And so I kind of, grokked Satoshi, I guess you could say, in his code, and learned to think like him, and then started extrapolating that out and developing the actual just tech stack. And then as I got further along, right, I kind of I observed crypto and watched all these different projects grow and come and go, and it just became really evident that there's a human issue, right? We're facing a massive human problem. You can make tech as much as you want all day long. You can make the tech decentralized, But if the human social structures aren't decentralized, it's just not going to work, right? It's just going to it's you know what entropy is, right? The second law of thermodynamics, like in a closed system,
chaos
decays towards chaos, right? So the chaos,
bunch of variables.
The entropy in a decentralized system is centralization, right? So if the energy of the system is not maintained, it will decay towards centralization, right? It's just people naturally want to, how should I say it? People naturally want to follow those that they feel are more capable. Like it's this strange psychological complex with, quote unquote authority, where authority would just be something that somebody perceives to be greater than them, to see things that they don't fully see. Like I think they did an experiment with people with a white lab coat saying, hey, go electrocute these people, push this button, I'm the authority, it's going to be okay, go do it. And I think like 60-70% of the people actually like electrocuted people to the point.
I think that was the Milgram experiment.
Yeah. And so there's this interesting dynamic, I guess you could say, with this authority, right? I mean, in some senses, you can see that we're all really still children, even when our bodies grow. Like we're still looking for some sort of guidance, right? And when people perceive that this authority, it triggers just this latent natural, I don't know, just like higher voltage directs lower voltage, electricity. When somebody has, perceived intellect, then people are going to naturally want to follow that. And so that's really the drive for dictatorships and social systems, that are based on kings, right? And even our federation, this democracy, quote unquote, or republic that we have, it's centralized. I mean, you're just electing the king, right?
Okay, let me ask you about that a little bit.
Yeah.
We have. I got my levels right here. One. The one thing that I'm looking for is when it went off the rails. Was it
the U.S.?
Yeah, at the beginning, before the ink was drying.
1789.
Okay, what happened then?
The Federation.
Okay, so that was the creation of after they ratified the Bill of Rights or whatever.
No, the Bill of Rights came from Virginia because they were opposed to the Federation Constitution. The Constitution Convention where George Washington was the chair and everyone's like, yay, that was a coup. That was a coup d'etat. There was before that from 1777.
Yeah, it was a secret meeting.
Yes, it was a coup.
What'd you do?
It was a coup.
You'll figure it out in the history books, and your grandson will know.
So 1776, you have the Declaration of Independence, which began the Revolutionary War, and then 1777 they created the Articles of Confederation. Yeah. Right, it was based off of the Iroquois Confederation. The Iroquois was the native Indians of that eastern area. And, the difference between a federation and a confederation is a federation generally has a type of central body that's regulating all of these independent states, where a confederation, which, granted in the Civil War, just to go on a little tangent, that was not a confederation. It was just something branded that way because they just carbon copied the federation. But a confederation is where you have these states where they're all essentially sovereign and there is no central independent body that governs them. You kind of have a Congress, and that's essentially how it worked in 1777. There was a Congress. They did not have power to levy taxes against people. They couldn't control the currencies. They couldn't, so basically,
which is why Hamilton and them wanted to create the Constitution, is to be able to
Hamilton and Washington. Hamilton was married into a British banking family, City of London, right?
His father-in-law was a banker, Bank of London or something. Yeah.
Yes. And Hamilton created Wells Fargo. He created the first bank, which was the first Federal Reserve, which people don't know. Everybody talks about 1913. But the very first one was 1781. Or 1791, sorry. 1791.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve is the third one.
Third one, exactly. Yeah. Right. So you have this Articles of Confederation. We win the war. And, over the 1780s, essentially, there became these, issues with the Confederation, right? There's hyperinflation, or they have this currency and then they're fighting these, and obviously that they will, right? So you you don't want them to really have this true confederation, because then you can't really control it because there's no central point, right? So they basically created a lot of chaos, which they're really good at doing. We've seen what they did in 2020, Antifa, BLM, just creating all this chaos and trying to get everybody being like, what do we do? What do we do? So they got Congress's approval to modify the Articles of Confederation, which the Articles of Confederation required unanimous consent by all of the states in order to modify it. Right? Then they do this Constitution Convention, and that's where they come up with the Federation, which George Washington was the chair of the Constitution Convention. and he, basically Hamilton suggested to have a single, like one person is the entire federal executive branch, the president, right? That was Hamilton's a king, exactly. And then there was one cool thing that came from it, the Great Compromise, which was the bicameral legislative, where you have the upper house and the lower house. That was because some of the states wanted, they were afraid of population control mob rules, and that's where you have the House of Representatives, where you have an equal representative for the number of people in your population. But then there was other smaller states that wanted, well, what if, this population mob rules is wrong?
You get to have an equal vote as a state.
So that's where they came up with the Senate, where you got 2 senators per state, right? And it became this kind of check and balance, which I like that. I like the bicameral legislative system.
It used to be. What happened?
What?
The 17th Amendment.
17th Amendment.
Okay, this is what happened.
Yeah.
The idea that you had the House, which was the people's house, that's where appropriations and money gets spent, and we need your taxes to do whatever, and we're going to, wage war on that kind of crap. Well, we're just here money. What they did is they said that will be by population. So that's why your congressional districts are gerrymandered into how you got like equal. You have like Arizona has 8 or 10 congressional districts, and each one of them have about the same population. Okay, so they have Congress. The United States Senate was made up of 2 senators per state, and the states determined how those senators were selected.
Oh, are you talking about the direct election?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. So that made where the senators.
Well, let me go ahead and finish on it so people understand.
Different
states had different mechanisms. Governors appointed them. Legislature voted them.
Usually legislators.
They
state
drew
legislators
straws.
Voted them,
flip coins, roll dice, whatever. That would go and they represent the state, and then the 17th Amendment.
So it was a direct election. Okay, yeah. So that's when they moved the direct election for the federal senators to be, quote unquote, body from the people. But it was having that indirect relationship had a better checking and balancing because it was the elected bodies of the states that would then send their senators to represent, which created a really strong checking and balancing because independent of your state's population, you were still able to get 2 votes. Right, comparatively to the House.
But it was also, you were much more bound by the representation of the interest of the state, as opposed to the people or special interest or spending money on campaigns or whatever. Depending on how they did it, the state has an interest. It's like here in the Southwest, it's, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, California, they be talking about Lake Mead. They're about the water. There's always about water or some boundary or something.
It's down, man. It's actually 30% down on power production, if you didn't know that. I think the top of it is, or the bottom is 780, 850 feet, something like that. And it's at like 1,000, 1,100, something like that. I mean, it's actually right at that threshold where it's stopping to produce electricity. Like Mead's almost completely.
Yeah, I know Bob's all electrified up.
Go to Deadpool.
Yeah, it's pretty much becoming a dead pool now. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe another year or 2, and it's just.
Well, I don't know. They got a lot of damn rain now. I don't know what the hell they're going to do. We'll see what comes off of the watershed. And so this happens in Arizona a lot. I mean, I've been here since 72. And I was like 12, and it's about every 7 to 10 years we're all going to die. It's a drought of whatever, and then it's just a cycle. It's like the sun cycle, and sooner or later, we get, we've been right the last couple of years. Oh, we're going to go. Well, it's going to start flooding. Well, here it comes. So it's kind of a cycle. There will be a time where it doesn't, and you're going to have a longer drought. Then we're in deep trouble, or the climate will shift and we start getting a lot more water. And I think we might be coming into a lot more water. There's going to be a cooling cycle that we're going into. I mean, they're screaming global warming.
May have taken a long time, but a lot of water carved those canyons.
Yeah.
I mean.
Or maybe it did it overnight.
It does rain here sometimes, and it roars. I've seen the rivers, since I've been out here, I've seen the river crossings. They used to put the roads in there, and the roads would all get washed away. They'd rebuild them out. It only happens once every 50 years, and it happened like every 3 or 4 years for a decade.
Well, this is, that's one of the things you brought that up. That was kind of who is that? Graham Hancock or maybe someone else. That the plateau in Colorado up there was, just an ocean of melted glaciers as the ice sheet receded. Well, then once that broke, kind of like what happened out of the Black Sea or maybe the Mediterranean, broke loose and all the water that's what they think happened at the beginning of the Grand Canyon, and that was done like a lot faster than thousands and thousands. It was like, here it comes, and the big boulders of whatever. So I don't know.
There's an interesting theory I found on the Grand Canyon, actually. I mean, you do have water that has carved it, but there's certain spots, if you see on the sides, they're 90-degree angles. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And that's kind of led to this, like, well, did the Grand Canyon form from this water erosion because water doesn't erode 90-degree corners, right? If you look over near the Grand Canyon, there's actually a really large crater, if you've ever seen it, right? Potentially, this is just a potential theory, an asteroid hit, and the impact was so strong, and it hit a fault line and a tectonic line that caused it essentially to open up, and then obviously the water comes in and it carves out through the rest of it. But there's some really interesting, like, unexplained, parts of the Grand Canyon.
I wasn't there.
I wasn't either. But
but it is interesting. Bob's big on geology and everything. He's a hiker and does this glacial trekking across, I'll see you in 100 miles kind of crap.
Used to.
No, he ain't doing it anymore. He's a freaking old man. He's retired on vacation now. But the so we go back. We're getting off on tangents. That'll happen a lot, especially with whatever.
Me and you, man.
But
17 hours, Ernie.
Oh yeah, that's right. He came at 6 a.m, didn't leave till midnight, and edited down to like a 9-hour show because we kept taking breaks. I was going, I understand blockchain now. Do you? Did you get a freaking 18-hour, Colin lesson? Well, I did. Donna kept feeding us and giving us drinks. Okay, so we're back to the beginning, the foundation of the country. We have the Declaration of Independence, bite me. Then it goes to the Articles of Confederation. You're saying Articles of Confederation.
Confederation, yeah.
And we had, like, I think 10 presidents during that time before we
had...
No presidents.
Well,
there was somebody elected had something.
No.
Okay, what were they?
There was only a Congress.
Well, then what were the executive guys?
There's none. It was a confederation. There was a Congress that kind of helped regulate loosely between the states, but it was a confederation, which is pretty much just like independent states. Nobody can fuck with anyone, pardon my language. And the Congress kind of helped, like they levied war, right? So there was like the Continental Army. And
well, I know there was, God, at least 10 president, Confederate, some guy sitting somewhere saying something.
The Civil War Confederation was not a confederation.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that.
It was, in my opinion anyway, it was a psyop to mar the image of what a confederation actually is. If you look through history, for instance, I think it was 1848, Switzerland had a civil war between Federation and Confederation. There was people that wanted Switzerland to be a confederation, and then there's people that wanted Switzerland to be a federation. And you look through history, you'll see there's a repeating series of events similar to what we had. But what I've noticed is you come out of the 1700s, you still got all of these royal bloodlines and these, Rothschild, all the bankers and whatever, they can influence these, royal figures very easily. It's centralized. They can go get them indebted, and, they're making lots of money. And then the United States comes and, creates this confederation. Oh, hell no, right? That it took essentially their ability to control away because it was decentralized, right? Think of a confederation as just like just like as purely decentralized as you can. You had a Congress that would levy war, or like approve things that would kind of unify the states, but and resolve disputes between some of the states. But I mean, each state had their own currencies, right? There wasn't a standard U.S. dollar currency, and that's one thing that they actually used during the 1780s in order to push exploit the weaknesses in the Confederation, the Articles of Confederation. They wanted,
that's what they gave. They had their constitutional, convention. As the ruse is that I think it was Franklin or even some of these guys, they were going, look, weights and measures. We need to have a standardized weights and measures. A pound is a pound, is a dollar is a dollar, is a whatever. And that was the reason they used that they needed to have this meeting. And when they had the constitutional convention, it was under the guise that they were just, it don't mean nothing. They're just over there weighing out stuff. It's going to be
entirely. They were authorized by Congress. There was enough mayhem created through the 1780s, such as hyperinflation, and some they were printing a lot of money in some of the colonies, and then they created conflicts between some of the states, and essentially, created the narrative that Congress does not have enough power to maintain the peace between the states. The states are all too decentralized. Everybody's acting on their own self-interest, and we need to modify the Articles of Confederation. So that
wait a minute. The Articles of Confederation. Let me get this, because I always thought there was presidents, and here it says, John Hanson's so-called first president dies in 1783. He would yada yada yada. What they did is the first president of the Continental Congress under the Articles of Confederation. So there was like a president of the meeting.
Yes.
Not
chair,
necessarily
not
of the
an
states.
executive.
Okay.
Yes.
So that distinction needs to be made.
Yes. Thank you for that. So the Articles of Confederation essentially require unanimous consent by all of the 13 colonies in order to ratify, and the Congress essentially approved to say, okay, we can modify these articles to give the Congress essentially more power, the president a little more power in order to maintain the peace and standardize and check and balance and yada, 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 right? But what really ended up happening was the Constitution Convention, right, which they did in secret.
Which was the plan by some of these guys to begin with.
Bingo. If you actually look...
It was the WEF.
There's an interesting correlation with presidents and bloodlines, too. They're all somewhat related to European bloodlines, right? Most of the presidents are related to some of those bloodlines. We can get into actually where those bloodlines came from. It's interesting. They actually originated from Normandy in France. A lot of the actual European royalty, if you want to get on the Da Vinci Code, they were actually descendant from Christ and Mary Magdalene.
But then we'll never make it to Nexus.
What?
No, to what you've done to thwart all this stuff.
Exactly.
We'll be deep, but it might be relevant in a lot of this stuff to what we're doing here. So
the social system. When we get to it, I've been imagining. We'll get to that as we extrapolate it out. How you could actually create an entire decentralized global governance system that's not a federation, that checks and balances on multiple levels. Remember your jar of jelly beans, the 200, 200 guesses or whatever, with the 97%. It utilizes that concept to create kind of, how should I say it, more levels that you have to go through that check and balance you at every one of those stages. And the bigger it
so
gets,
you don't get lost. What
geographically, the more. Just hold on. The more it geographically spreads, then the more checks and balances you have. So essentially, as it grows, the security of it grows too, right? Right now, if you just have a president in the United States multiplies in its area, you still have one person controlling all of that geographic area. With this, as you add more states and colonies and counties and all of that, it grows in the checks and balances. So it's kind of like it becomes more secure.
The people
as you
are
add.
the check and balance.
Yes. And it makes it a clear pathway for people to get involved in government, essentially, instead of it just being, okay, I'm going to go campaign and have the money and create visibility and then get people to vote for me, or just rig the voting machines like Katie Hobbs and boom. There's just one step between not having power and having power in the current systems, right? And they're all modeled off of this federation model that was really driven by Alexander Hamilton and George Washington. Alexander Hamilton was the one that suggested, going back to the Constitution Convention, 1789, that sorry for jumping around but Hamilton and Washington had some interesting dynamics with each other. Hamilton, I think, actually quit under Washington because they butted heads a lot. Washington wasn't really known as the greatest, but he was known to be very moody, and he was a great general, but
great generals don't always
kind of. I mean, he wanted though. I mean, let's go back just a little bit to the Battle of Yorktown that won the Revolutionary War. Washington wanted to attack New York, and it was the French admiral that was like, no, we need to go to Yorktown. And so they created a decoy with all their people so that they thought that they were going to attack New York. But Washington really, strategically was, but they won Yorktown, and I mean, you know this, right? The French Navy did a pass by and took that bay where Yorktown was, and then Washington and Hamilton moved up, and then Hamilton used that to kind of wedge his way up the chain, because there's two barracks or two I guess, frontal palisades or whatever that, one Washington was leading, and then it was another person that was actually going to lead the other charge, and then Hamilton's like, I'm Hamilton, you need to me, I want to lead it, so he could put his name in the books and push his way through. But, Hamilton was a mole. He was a mole. And so was Washington, I think, was relatively a mole.
Allowed it.
Yeah, the public loved him, and that's why they used him to chair the Constitution Convention. And they essentially used this convention to craft this new federation, which, like I said, the bicameral legislator with is called the Great Compromise that was cool. I like that, right? Like, I like the dual house legislator where you balance the population with the actual just state itself, with your senators and your House of Representatives, and then House of Representatives can only invoke the budgets, and then the senators act as check and balance, but bills have to pass both houses, so on and so forth. So the legislative, the federation legislative branch, I liked. Like, I like how they did that. But Hamilton then comes, okay, well, the executive branch, how are we gonna do this? And he was like, we need a single executive, because he can pivot faster and blah blah blah. It goes back even to the Roman Republic. If you're not familiar, the Roman Empire was actually a republic before it became the empire. Julius Caesar and Cleopatra were part of the collapse of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire, and they actually the senator means old man, right? So the Senate was a Roman Republic construct, right? And that's where the term came from. But they had like the Senate. That I think Roman Republic was in a wartime. There was a barbarian group that was sacking Rome, and they elected this guy as a temporary dictator. The reason I'm going on this tangent is to kind of show some of the justification. Is they elected dictator because a dictator can pivot quickly. He doesn't have to go through all these checks and balances to make decisions. So if you have like a war happening and you need to make a decision immediately. A dictator. Yeah, and that's a justification for having this single executive, right? So essentially, the executive branch of the United States, as far as the Federation is concerned, in our Constitution, is one person. Controls everything, right? Now, you obviously have all these different subsets of this executive branch, but they're all appointed by this one person, which a lot of people pushed back on it. They did not like the idea. They said a king is a king is a king is a king. But Hamilton's like, no, but blah, 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 and dictator, and blah, 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 and Roman Republic, and, but we need it for the military, and And then, eventually they finally were like, okay, yeah, we're going to do a single executive, a single president. And then they came up with the Supreme Court as well for the judicial branch. And so that's the beginning of the three branches that was loosely based off of, I think, a French architecture. That there was another guy, I think 50 years prior, that had worked on this, like multiple three branches of government, right? So, long story short, we get the Federation. But states didn't like it, right? I think they had like 7 states that ratified it pretty quickly, but Virginia was the most populous colony of all of them. I think they were at 8, and they needed 9, so they put in this new constitution. For mind you, backing up, the Articles of Confederation required unanimous consent to modify the Confederation, right? The Federation only required 2/3, so 9 out of 13 is all they required to modify it, and they did that because they knew there was going to be some states that were going to be like, no. We don't want that.
Yeah, okay. Aren't you hearing that cling?
Yeah.
That's what that is the stream going down and coming back up.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, because we're talking to Colin Cantrell, that's why. You think I'm kidding.
No.
There are certain things you talk about you're not allowed.
Oh,
I know.
Yeah. I mean, the Aspen conference was that Aspen Institute is where they have all their Bilderberg G7 summits. Like Bill Gates is a big financer of that, and we had every libertarian that ever was a libertarian all there. Took them totally by surprise. They had no idea who Nexus was. Nexus conference. Then all of a sudden, fucking Ron Paul shows up. Double
Doug
rainbows.
Casey.
Doug Casey. All of it.
Us. I mean, it was,
they cut off the Wi-Fi a lot during that. I mean, my phone's actually, it's got an interesting tap on it, so like my microphone goes in and out. But they're such bad coders that it actually cross the feed with whoever's tapping me, so I can actually hear them in the background. And like when I try to record a voice memo, sometimes I'll hear a phone vibrating, like someone's phone that is like crossing over with, and I can hear someone talking in the background, like whatever.
We just assume they're listening. Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can go on and on about that.
How you doing?
Okay, now what I was going to inject when he talked about the I don't know, gumballs or whatever you were saying.
Jelly beans.
That's
the signature Ernest.
So the jelly bean thing is
and
that
bubble gum.
that if you take a carafe or a pitcher or something and you put, a gazillion jelly beans in it, well, it's an irregular shape or whatever, and you go, there's... What they do is they ask, I think the secret number is like 200 people. 180 something, 200 people.
I think it's 200, yeah.
You go to 200 people and you say, how many jelly beans do you think? I think there's 1 million. Oh, I think there's 40. I think there's, 4,286. I mean, whatever it is, they don't throw out the outliers.
Yep.
For some reason, that million and those 5, they keep that in the average. And I'm like, why would you? Whatever. Okay, so they do that. Then they go and they ask everybody, how many's in there. After you get to about 200, and you go, all right, well, total it up, average it out to 200 by 200, and what is it? Boom. It's within, nothing, 1%, 0.5%,
yep.
or whatever, what the total is. It's called the wisdom of the crowd,
yep.
Okay? And this is where, like we were talking about before, when Google started out with their search engine, it was what everybody thought was the most relevant for those words that you put in. That's what made it to the top of Google, not because they want you to be woke and you need the trans version of whatever,
Somewhat, yeah, it was a reverse weighted, so if other people link to your page, the more links that other people have posted on other websites, based on their ranking, that creates a weighted ranking for you. It's a backlinking algorithm, essentially. So
there was a linking thing too. But anyway,
that's how it originally worked.
The point that I'm making is that they relied on the wisdom of the people's preferences, was heavily weighted, to where now you just get whatever the hell you get, what they want you to get,
Yeah.
But so when you have these different functions of government, parliaments or the upper and lower house with the judicial and executive branches of, you get all 3 lined against the rights of the individual, you find yourself in a free speech zone constitutionally, kind of crap. But anyway, the point is that Colin looked at all of these and he's like, I like this, this worked out well, this sucked, I don't want this, we do that. Then I can code.
And I studied corruption pretty heavily, pretty thoroughly.
Is there a class for that? Corruption. There's a class for that.
No, but you build a global decentralized currency, you get lots of people that want to centralize it, right? If they can, they will. So I had the vice president of Allergan Pharmaceutical, the Botox company, VP of the global Allergan. We were talking with Pfizer, Sony Music UK, UPS. I taught UPS, by the way. Anything they say about blockchain, I taught them. I wrote the papers for all of their execs to learn about all of it. And then they just took our ideas and tried to sell them back to us through an RFP, request for proposal. It's pretty funny. They're such a dysfunctional company, by the way. It was really funny. They had a blockchain, Mahesh. We were doing a little pilot use case with UPS Capital subsidiary, and then Mahesh, the head of blockchain, who, if you've seen, they talk about their global blockchain that they use for all their packet management. They didn't have a blockchain, and that was Mahesh's whole plan as the head of blockchain. Okay, well, let's just say we have a blockchain, and no one will ever know, man.
Our stock goes up.
And then all of a sudden, UPS Capital is doing a use case, a little pilot they were doing for high value supply chains, and he's like, oh, hell no, who's these Nexus people? And then, come on to Georgia, come on over, we need to see, and then, he was all just how do I get rid of these guys? It was me and Dino. Dino was the very first fellow for Cisco. So Cisco, the fellow is, the top of the tech, right? Top of the tech pyramid in Silicon Valley. If you're a fellow, you call all the shots. Big companies.
Was he the guy that went to the Phoenician when you had an event there?
Yes, he was at the 2017 conference, too. He's largely responsible for a lot of the internet. He worked on Milnet, ARPANET. He was one of the fathers of the internet, essentially. He works on location identity separation protocol. But he was the very first fellow of Cisco, so he was the guy. For instance, I think some of the large tech companies in Silicon Valley have maybe half a dozen fellows. That's the highest position.
Okay, let me ask you this question so that you can so the audience will understand the rarity of your skills and so on. If I were to take, even now, it's 2020 freaking 3, okay? Yeah. I remember when I was a kid in school, I'll be alive when it's 2001. We're going to be on the moon and, whatever, right? And then 2010
Odyssey.
and 2020. Well, 23, it's the same crap because it's the same crap. It's going to get the man out of the way. But anyway, so you have these tech people that can spend the 18 hours, or willing to spend the 18 hours, with Ernie explaining blockchain to me,
Yeah.
And it started off with, okay, why is it 8-bit?
Yeah.
Why is it do what's 8-bit mean? What's the hardware? What's our limitation?
Yep.
That's where it started with my education. Okay.
Oh, yeah, we went deep.
So I was like, I want to know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, Bob, he does the same thing on electricity
Here,
with me.
read the manual.
Yeah, he reads the manual. Right. Bob reads the manual. I'm like, I know a guy. So anyway, Colin, explained all this to me, and I need to really, from your perspective, how many people are there alive today? There may have been some, everybody died off, but I mean, how many people are alive today that truly understand the internet from 8-bit computer kind of up to everything it does, networking of, encryption of whatever?
There's a lot of people. Usually the IETF Internet Engineering Task Force, maybe 1,000 people, and they do that 3 times a year. But a lot of those guys are just like sent there to observe. Like, I mean, the guys that are actually.
Why do you know out of 8 billion people? Is it 1 million? Is it 100,000? Is it 10,000?
It's about 1,000 people that go to the IETF regularly. If you've seen RFC, it's a request for comment. It's an old IETF thing.
Yeah.
That's where they create all the protocols on the internet. That's where they standardize everything. Usually about 1,000 people. It's a bunch of old.
Okay,
heads.
so it's going to be more
For
than
the
that.
The internet, like low-level internet developing. You have the IEEE and then the IETF. IEEE does layer 1 and 2, which is the physical layer, and then the data link layer, and then layer 3 and above, which is network, transport, session, presentation, and then interface. Application. I've got my own stack, so I'm crossing wires a little bit. The IETF standardizes everything from layer 3 up, generally. So about 1,000 people. I mean, you'd get, and it's most of the same people, but as far as even the groups of people in the IETF, most of them are all just like, oh, look at what we've done. Oh, what have we created? Oh, you have Facebook. Oh, what have we done? They're so full of themselves, right? I mean, it is
my point
wolf den at the IETF, and that's actually where a lot of my ideas were birthed. Maybe not birthed. I birthed them independently of that, but that's where I put them to test. Right? Be like, okay, I'm going to throw them into the wolf den of these old guys that think they know everything about the internet, and I'm going to go tell them they're wrong and that they fucked up, and I'm going to tell them how we're going to fix it. And it was pretty funny seeing some of the chairs, like, I mean, they're just sitting there like falling asleep with like all the working group drafts, like, and then I start talking about like decentralized and mathematical verification of trust so that you don't need certificate authority and all these things. And he's just like, what? Blasphemy! Like, freaking out.
I'm
like,
here to make sure that doesn't happen.
And he tried to drill me, the chair. Joel, he drilled me, and then, I answered the questions. Well, mathematics is independently verifiable. You can have a consensus algorithm that's able to regulate, and you have a decentralized ledger that allows you to be able to create root of trust through all these different things. And he just, but you didn't document this well enough. That's all he could attack me for. I was like, all right, I did good. You know what I mean? I vetted my ideas. Like a lot of these things, right. I didn't just go and be like, oh, hey, I got this great idea.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go build
remember.
it. I threw it into the wolf den, because things aren't worthy if you can't throw them in the fire.
This is the point that I want to make, exactly. Is that when you have all these people, and I say, how many people are, I don't know, 1,000 out of 8 billion? I mean, our entire, from butts and nuts to bolts, all layers up, it takes, for anybody, one person to even understand the whole thing, those one people, there's 1,000 of them out of 8 billion, and I'm going, yay,
It's like the grand priestess of the
exactly.
internet.
Exactly.
Yeah, they are the grand priests of the internet. I mean, the way they walk around too. The IETF was a really interesting.
Okay,
place.
now there's a separation. This is the point I wanted to make. I can go to some teenager, and I go, "How does this cell phone work?" Oh, well, hand it over and I'll show you. And they know all the apps and how to do the settings and get in the back end, your accessibility of the yada yada, and change the text. Size, font, color, kind of whiz bang, and and then backdoor of this and this app and this kind of, yada yada. Okay?
Yeah.
No. I take the cover off and you look at all the little electronic components and the chips and I go, no, how does it work? and their eyes, glaze over. They have no freaking idea.
No.
So when you say some people know how the internet works, I mean, now how it works from the beginning. You got time traveled into the past or way into the future, and they don't have it. Could you rebuild it?
Oh yeah, me.
I know you can, but I mean, how many of those people are there? 1,000? 5?
I mean, maybe even less than that. I mean, a lot of the IETF is, I mean, a lot of the big companies, they send their people there just to go make sure they have a presence and stuff. But as far as people, I would equate the people that know how they could build it by the people that can see what's wrong with it, right? Most of the people in the IETF think that they're gods and created the most greatest technology that mankind has ever seen, right? I look at it and I'd be like, wait, you did what? Wait, border gate protocol. Okay, wait, just let me get this straight, man. So I can just send a message on border gate protocol and claim any range of IP addresses, and everybody just believes me, right? Well, yeah. Well, so who the fuck owns an IP address then? Well, there's protections and blah, 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 and you remember who else has owned it and blah, blah, blah. But it's not authenticated, is it? Well, no. Okay, well, what about my resolution from my MAC address to my IP address? Like, it's called an address resolution packet. Do you prove that I'm my MAC address? No. You just shoot anything out. Just be like, hey, here's my ARP. I'm over here, guys. Like, yeah, now I'm yours. I got your MAC address now. Oh, you think you have that IP address? Nah, no, that's mine now. Border gate protocol. I just sent a message to the internet, and it said, oh, cool. Believe me. The internet was designed with, it originally was an institutional thing. It was 1969. It was RFC1. I read the very first few RFCs just for, I'm a geek. 1969 request for comment, right?
From by whom to whom?
Network engineers to network engineers. You had IMPs, interim messages processors. They had 5-bit addresses back then, so I think that was 2 to 5. I think it was 64 or 32. There were 32 possible addresses, like the original interim message processors. They're essentially just ARPANET. It was just connections between large institutions, and they used that to just start sending packets, right? But it was a trusted network, right? And then they developed.
I know Fred.
Yeah, I know Fred, and I know he's not going to lie, and so then they build that, and then they get into MILNET in the 80s, and that's when IP version 4 comes out, and then that's when they went to 32 bits, which gives you 4.3 billion addresses. But still, they kept this model of like the internet's an open communication system, and there's everybody trusts each other, and they didn't think in the adversarial mindset of like, well, what if somebody's not trustworthy? And the internet is still coping with that, right? There's all these. They put all these bandages on it to try to make it work. Like have you ever heard near hacker conferences, if you go to DEF CON or something, you hear people say don't log in to your bank account on public Wi-Fi. Have you heard that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Anyone you're hackers. That's because the address resolution packets are not authenticated. So
no, they were having people going to DEF CON and they had your phone information up on a screen that they put up because you're a bunch of morons and we captured all your crap. It's right there.
Yeah.
I've seen stories on that.
Yeah.
The one thing that I wanted to get right to Nexus and so on, but this is good information because this is, how you've arrived at the necessity for the system that you're creating for a use as what? A governance model for self-government of the wisdom of the crowd.
Yes.
Okay?
Correct.
So that's how all this stuff comes together.
Correct.
Yeah, I can do it. See, I can do it. So you have the attention to how you create various different governments and how the United States did it, the pitfalls, the problems, the whatever, and there's been that. And, the United States, we've lasted a while. We're industrial, whip-ass military kind of, kicked ass on the planet for, a long time. And it was because to the degree that we were free, to the degree that we protected individual rights, to the degree that we left people alone, they become very productive.
Yep.
So now you're looking at, all right, well, we got these systems, and you learn a lot from that. But I want to create a governance model that everybody gets to have their say. whoever we determine everybody is. I don't know, infants, maybe not. I don't know. They buy enough baby formula, they get to be in charge of baby formula production. But the point is that you have all of these people that are participating in this governance model. They get to have verifiable blockchain encryption, public-private key certainty that their input is at least counted the minuscule 1/300 millionth of whatever their vote is, but it counts, okay? Their participation counts. They can, lobby for more people to support them, and then their opinion counts. They get into whatever their jurisdiction that it counts. Their federation with whatever, that counts. Their octalog of group of family, community of whatever, that counts. So I'm going, okay, building that kind of what is that? A stack, an app, a deck, what do you call that?
I'm calling it the social stack. Essentially, it's a layered stack. I mean, I've kind of found this really. Stacks are a really good architecture. That's what I've been working with. Like we have the new, like the internet right now is built on an architecture that's called the OSI, Open Systems Interconnection, and that's essentially how you architecturally have the distinctions. And a stack essentially is just each layer is responsible for different levels of processing, on the computational level. And so, Nexus is a 7-layer software stack, and then that kind of led me as I got more into the social systems to a social stack, because they scale, right?
Now, what'd you call it before social stack?
Social
stack.
Yeah,
whatever stack, software stack.
Yeah,
so now you go in social stack.
Yeah, I mean.
But how are you developing it? Colin thought of it, and I'm really smart and get over it. I am your king, Or you created the social stack as a mechanism for building the social stack.
I started. I'd be lying if I said I started Nexus saying I was going to design this whole new social system. It was just as I studied the problems of humanity and developed technology to start to resolve it, and then watched the social dynamics within it, it just became more and more evident, okay, well, we have a human problem. It's not just a tech problem, it's a human problem, right? Right? It's a human problem. Yeah, and everybody's talking in blockchain about scaling blockchain. Yay, we're going to be the most scalable blockchain. Woohoo! But they don't socially scale. Right? They're socially unable to scale.
Okay, wait. Define that.
Social scalability, right? The ability for people to come to consensus in a scalable way, and for you to have potentially millions or billions of people involved in a system where it doesn't collapse upon itself, and you don't have these mob rules, and you also don't have, without the centralization. Because generally the way social systems scale is you have a spider, right? You remember the spider. You have the spider and the starfish. You have your head, basically it's your board, and then they appoint your C-suite, which is your CEO, CTO, CFO, blah, blah, blah. And then they appoint all their managers, and they, manage each department, and then they, hire their little underlings, and then they create their secondary day manager, and yeah, right? So you have, one person that can essentially transmit information. If you have 1 million people, how are you going to transmit information? How are you going to communicate and coordinate these people together in a scalable way? Generally, they do it through, hierarchies, right? And there's the reason that these social systems that are hierarchical have existed is because there is an element of truth in a hierarchy. There is.
Yeah, it usually started, because we had to win a war. It's general, colonel, major, lieutenant, whatever the hell.
Not just
captain, whatever.
In the reference of some people are essentially just more capable than others, right? You wouldn't want somebody that had cognitive disabilities to be running the country, right? Well, we have that now, but
funny you should mention that.
And now look at what's happening.
Yeah,
by
design.
Exactly. There's an element where more capable people should have more responsibility per se, right? If we break apart the components of the word responsibility, your ability to respond, right? So the more capable you are as an individual, then the more you're able to respond. So therefore, you should be the person that's in charge of an army, launching the nuclear weapons versus somebody that's cognitively disabled. They're gonna just
You saw that back all the way even with indigenous people. The guy who was the best hunter was leader of the pack or
the hunting party.
Yeah, he became chief. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so there's an element of truth in that, right? But what's been lost, I think, through society and through oligarchies, monarchies, all of that, is there's this this conception, and this is the World Economic Forum is really embodies this principle is, okay, we're more capable, we're smarter than you, we can do more than you, so therefore you serve me, right?
Gosh darn it, we tell the media that people like me.
And that's what's backwards about everything. That's the half lie, right? Like you can't, like if you notice all of this propaganda, they weave it in with truth, right? Because a whole lie can be easily discovered, but a half truth can live on indefinitely because there's elements of truth in it, right? So the whole hierarchical principle is a half truth. Right, and there's a lot of people that really support it because you really don't want like cognitive disabled Johnny or Brandon getting up into the top because they're going to make bad decisions that are going to affect a lot of people's lives. Right, you want the best decision maker to be that.
So this is what you did. You created a mechanism by which you could discover the imbeciles. That people get to have an input. Hey, man, you got to discover the imbeciles.
Kind of.
I find it pretty easy most of the time.
Think of it, instead of discovering the imbeciles, per se, it's switching the
Vote
dynamic
them off the island!
From if I'm more capable, instead of using my higher levels of capability to exploit the imbeciles, I use them to lift up the imbeciles, right? You use your extra cognitive capabilities to help, bridge the cognitive disabilities in whoever the imbecile is, right? Right now, the way it is if you're dumb, then you're going to be exploited, you're going to be manipulated, you're going to be controlled. And, those that are more capable are the ones that rule above that. And that's a top-down structure, right? And it's still, a type of stack. Everything in nature is really a stack. You have, all the way up to the spiritual planes and everything, right? Like you get these levels and hierarchies of vibration, essentially, where higher vibrations can have higher levels of influence dimensionally, right? But besides that, this is a bottom-up stack, so it's designed to have the power derived from the people, from the base, and as I'll have to explain it a little better, but I'm going to say it in a pretty crude way. Having the imbeciles be the ones that are in power rather than the geniuses, quote unquote. And what I mean by that is that the imbeciles are just going to, there's a lot of people that just want to live their life. They want to go, make love to their girlfriend, and want to go eat their food and go do simple shit. And they don't want to have any responsibility, right? It's just their life. They don't want to be a manager. They just want to be told what to do and do it.
Bob, retired on vacation.
Exactly, right? And then there's other people that really want to rise up, and they want to be more than themselves, and they want to grow. So what this system does is it creates a place for all of them, where the people that just want to do their day-to-day, they elect somebody to represent them, right? And then that person generally is the most capable person in that group.
How big are these groups?
It follows a Fibonacci sequence. So as you know, the Fibonacci is modeled in galaxies, in hurricanes, storms, whatever, in nature, and snail shells.
Tree branches, how they come off of a tree.
Exactly.
It has kind of a pattern, and it's to get the most pack. It's an efficient way of nature to organize three-dimensional geometry.
Look, even you're perfectly proportional, right? Like 2, 2, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So our bodies are even proportional off the Fibonacci, right? It's a pretty common, so it's kind of like an expansion of energy. As you can see, like you have a storm, and as it expands out by a Fibonacci spiral, right? So as the organization expands in the number of people, the group size follows a Fibonacci. So we start on 3 instead of 1, 1, 2. We just start with 3, which is 3 branches, right? And so we follow that. We talk about smart contracts, right? What is it? Code is what with a smart contract?
I don't know.
Law, right? That's the whole premise behind blockchain.
Okay.
Code is law. So the legislators are,
I don't know, users.
Coders. Code is law. Who's the people that writes the law? The code is the law. So the people
don't ask me questions. It's like I feel like I'm on a test. Like I'm going to know the right answer.
Sorry, I've been. This is how I teach my kids. I make them think.
No, that's not me. That's Bob.
So
you
got
code
legislative.
Is law. You got law. But code is more than just law. It's not a subjective thing. It's written down.
Yeah, it essentially the idea of a smart contract is I don't need to have a paper contract and enforce it through a court system, to sue you. If you violate this contract, you can have a
it's
self-executing
triggered. It's
smart
black
contract.
and white. It either happened or it didn't happen.
And you have it enforced through mathematics, right, rather than court systems. So code is
much
law.
less subjective.
So you have the legislative branch, which is essentially developers. Then you have the executive branch, which, in our organizations are ambassadors, and then you have a judicial branch. So the way I designed the judicial branch is it's kind of a neutral third party that doesn't really have any authority unless there's a dispute, right? So, a judicial representative can't go initiate something. It's required by either the ambassadors or developers to initiate something. So you got your 3 branches, right? And then in each branch, there's 5 arms. Okay, so you got 3, 5, okay? Each one of the arms has a specific purpose. In like the ambassador branch, we have interactions, which is like social media, interacting with people. Impressions, which is like website, ads, stuff like that. Relationships, which is like use cases, exchanges. And then communications, which is like articles, writing, publications. And then I always forget one of them. Media. Media is like, 3D graphics, videos, things like that. So those are our 5 arms of the ambassador branch. And then developer branch, we have, interface, logical, Tau, LXOS, and mining. So they're all independent. And so you get this 5 arms, which the minimum personnel is 5 people to form a branch, right? I mean, you could technically do it with 2, but it's best to have 5. And then each one of them, let's just go through a simulation of bootstrapping. And you got your 3 branches. Generally, to start it, you get a couple judicial representatives that then go find people to populate the initial branch, right, for the ambassador developer, which would be 5 individuals. And then those 5 individuals go and they populate a group of 8, right, following Fibonacci, right? So then, to 13, then 21, and so on and so forth. And what's cool about it is it multiplies exponentially, right? When you get to groups of 13, you're at 520 people. When you get to 21, you're at 10,900 people. So it scales exponentially. But every time you add a layer, a new group, you have a jar of jelly beans, right? You have a number of people that are voting and coming to consensus. So the way it works, at least in the U.S. Embassy for Nexus, is you have the funds come out of the Treasury, the judicial branch, which then is voted in a joint session between the chairs, and you create a branch budget, which allocates a certain amount to the developers and a certain amount to the ambassadors based off of ratification. If developers and ambassador chairs can't agree, then the judicial steps in and they're the tiebreakers. So cryptographically, it's a 2/3 multisig, so 2 of 3 branches. That way you get a checking and balancing where, you could have a completely rotten branch.
And this is for actually the allocation of resources.
Yes, allocation of budget, but also, overall strategies too. So generally speaking, your group of 5, right, which is your 5 chairs is what we call them there.
I just want you to know, audience, that there's
arms.
no way in hell he's going to do this in a 40-minute presentation at Anarchapulco, so you guys are getting
We're doing
goody,
a workshop. Yeah, I'm going to do a workshop at Anarchapulco about it to help kind of give a simulation for people to develop. Because, it really... I studied corruption, right? And I developed this system by studying corruption. I told you Harvard Business School, UPS, it was Sony UK, we were talking to Accenture, what is it? AXA, the insurance companies. I went on a tour, man. Like God just was like, here you go, man. Go out into the world. I'm just like, whoa, this is happening really fast, but okay. But it was just to go on a little tangent. There was some fun times where I'd go into a meeting with the head CTO of the biggest insurance company in the world, AXA. And, people wait years for a meeting with this guy. I walk in with sports shoes, my shoes, my shirt doesn't fit right, didn't have my suspenders at that time. These guys all just
Yeah, but
here
your hair was all cut and neat, and you were freaking corporate back then.
A little bit. But this guy's just sitting here just like, yo, I've talked to every blockchain person, IBM, whatever, what do you know? You don't even know how to dress, man. You're wearing sports shoes. Nobody walks in here with sports shoes. This is I'm the guy, And I just start going, la, 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 and drawing the stacks and all the stuff. And this guy goes from this to and he runs all the way to the office of the person that set up the meeting. It's like, these guys are amazing, right? It's just really interesting to watch how you can dissolve all this.
Because you listen to so much BS from people, especially if you're an exec that knows something, and you get these guys that know how to spell blockchain, and they come in and BS, and you're like, why are you wasting my time?
Exactly. And I found this like just the enthusiasm and love like for just like what I do, like just it melted all of that, all of those defense mechanisms, and it was really cool. It was really interesting. There's just random side story from like all these tours and stuff. Like we wrote the paper that taught most of the big businesses about blockchain. Like we were partnered with Tech UK, which is a firm in London that deals with all of the large companies. I mean, IBM, Amazon, Google, all of that. And they were getting into blockchain and wanted to learn about it. We wrote the paper on it. And then I wrote the paper to teach all the UPS executives about blockchain. Like I went around, man. But through that, I was doing, social analysis. Okay, well, like, what do people do? How does corruption work? How does it tick? What are they going to do? And then Harvard Business School guy wants to be our CEO, Ajay Ahuja. He's vice president of Allergan. They're the company that created Botox. So, top of pharma coming, trying to take us over and turn us into a big
explain it to you.
Corporate, and blah, blah, blah. And I developed this social architecture in the midst of all of that by studying corruption and be like, how does corruption work? What does it want to do?
And there it is with its shiny silk tie right there, and it's coming after me, and I need to protect against that.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked. It worked great. What was so cool about it, too, is when I first presented it to the team, like the logos were solid. Like the methods of persuasion, pathos, ethos, and logos. Pathos are like you elicit an emotional response. Ethos is you elicit like a societal reputation, like, oh, I've got 10 degrees and blah, blah, blah. That's ethos, is a method of persuasion. Pathos is like, oh, but Ernie, like it's so hard and I need some help. Like you're eliciting an emotional reaction to persuade someone.
Empathy.
Yeah. Pathos, ethos. And then logos is logic, right? So I was using logos in that, like to just like, here it is, and here's, hierarchies and blah, 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 and capabilities. They could not tear it apart. They tried. They hated it. Like they were just like freaked out. And I actually used it to kind of break up a lot of that and like corruption that I was facing like internally in the MZ in like 2018. Like they were trying to stonewall me and lawyer me and like put me painted into a corner and get the keys and like take everything over, and then like they do to every one of the idealist creators. I mean, like just take it over and turn it into something that you can profit on directly and ruin the vision from it, and that's what they were trying to do. But I'm just, yay, Colin, I'm happy. I like to build stuff, so they thought I was a moron, because people think when you're happy you're a moron. And they didn't see me coming. They really did. It is true. It really is. Like, I mean, and naturally, I'm just a happy person, so I don't have to put on any acts or anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but so it worked really good because they I think it was towards the last like few weeks of Ajay's time, he was just like, holy shit, you're very logical, Colin. I didn't realize. I'm like, how do you think I made it this far, man? Like, he's like, but you're so happy. Like, it doesn't make sense. How can you be happy and logical at the same time? Like, like, it's funny. This guy
never smile.
This guy graduated the same class as Ray Dalio, right? So like, he's just, I mean, you see his picture, man. He has like pointy ears and like red behind. I mean, like the guy, like big smile. He looked like the devil, man. The dude was a trip. Like, and he was already working on a whole thing to oust me and everything. Like, so I had to take on his Harvard Business School lawyer and all that shit. And like, I mean, ultimately it was like, well, in crypto we trust. Like, you guys think you got all your paper? We can go fuck yourselves, because like I don't care about tax liabilities and I got the cryptographic keys. So have fun, And they failed ultimately, but they ended up being a really good case study for me to be able to see. Okay, well, how does this corruption from the top of the corrupt world, right?
Okay. Let me bring this together.
Yeah.
You can hear from the conversation that, there's me and Colin right there. You can hear from the conversation that you're wanting to have some kind of a better social construct to where people's rights and desires and dreams and possessions and contributions and everything is done voluntarily. It is done in such a way that people opted in. Yeah. People are represented, proportionally. They got to have some influence. They can gather some, and it's not corrupt overtly, So I'm wondering, where is the corruption in is it corrupt because there are humans involved in any way? Is it corrupt, the abuse of the majority? Is it, but what you're trying to do is to put into code law. You're trying to put in where everybody has a representation and a reputation, in this governance model that you've created the branches. You got not so much an executive really, but you have a judiciary and a legislative, and there's funding mechanism, but it's the wisdom of the crowd for the reps, the wisdom of the crowd to keep them there, to take them away, to have all. So what you're looking for is not anarchy.
No,
you're not thinking that there aren't going to be, there's going to be rules, just no rulers.
Yeah.
Where's the rulers? Is there a ruler?
No, there's not. I founded it and created it, and I don't control it. I have to ask permission to do things. It's just the way it works. It's great. But think of it like a body, right? Think of all of us as like cells of a larger body, right? If your blood cells, your red blood cells are fighting your white blood cells because, I don't like you, you're white, man, you red, man, like, yo. The body's not going to function, right? Autoimmune disease, where your immune system attacks your internal organs. It's kind of, if you want to compare Earth to a body, we got an autoimmune disorder and we got cancer. Corruption is cancer, okay? It's a cell that mutates and it grows and proliferates, and that's the fundamental common denominator I found with all corruption is
what, government?
No. The fundamental thing that corruption wants to do is spread, period. Like, that's the fundamental drive. Like, misery loves company, Like, it's not fun when you're just corrupt by yourself because then you feel guilty. But when you got, someone else on and then someone else and then you corrupt them, then, you share the power, which makes it more sustainable, right? Because you can't just have all the power yourself. So you got to get all these other people corrupt. And, it spreads like a disease. And so when you have, like, these large pots of people, right, like a crypto community or in your body between all these main points like organs, think of it as like a body of people where you have these different groups that, form of like interest, and that like interest then unifies them to a focus that then they have, essentially people that they act to represent them that become the messengers between, these different layers. But one thing that makes it resist corruption is it isolates corruption. It isolates and contains it, kind of like
the white blood cell envelops it and
quarantine. That's the word I was looking for. It's like it quarantines corruption. So, like, a conventional, you got, let's say, a CEO. All you got to do is go get that CEO to, do one corrupt thing, and now you can corrupt 10,000 people. You could destroy 10,000 people's lives. Or now you get a president, you can destroy 330 million people's lives in America, right? One person, 330 million people, fucked, right? This makes it so that you can't do that. Like, you have to go and try to infiltrate one of the cells, but if you infiltrate the cell, you can try to corrupt the entire cell, but it allows itself to resolve itself by allowing things to die off, right? We've had arms regenerate multiple times, and we've had arms get cut off through, they got basically a conviction from the jury, and they just, snipped. We've had a couple arms snipped, actually, and then they regenerate and grow a new limb, right? Cells in your body die. Cancer cells need to die. Right?
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah.
Over the years, because this has been going on, long time. God, 6, 7, 8 years? I mean, how
Nexus?
long? Yeah.
9.
9 years.
9,
well,
yeah.
How long before you really started? Because you had a lot of interest in the heyday of crypto. Everybody wants to be your buddy and the CEO of We Rule You and make sure you do what we want and not do what we don't want, and you're going to be free, and we're going to make sure that doesn't happen, people. Okay? Yeah. You go through that. You get that experience of the corruption and how to protect against that. You can code. We need a law. There ought to be a law. It's called code. Okay, so you code it, all right?
Yeah.
So then you start having this isolation of these, cancer cells and pushing it out. I've known at least a couple of times you talked about that you've had that happen, okay? How many of those major cancer bouts have you pushed out? What have you learned from it, and where is it now in its development? How far along are we?
We've had, so we launched I designed it in 2018, and studied social dynamics through that lens for about 3 years. Just be like, okay, here's my architecture, here's all my, I'm going to continue to study social dynamics. I kind of let watched the community team metastasize on its own, just naturally what formed, and watch what happens. And it was really interesting. You get like greasy wheels, like this person has access to this, they become the gatekeeper, so then these people go to them, and then they have to access through that, and then they're not really like admired or respected by anyone, but they're the ones who got the keys, and so then they go, and then they're trying to fight each other to try to take control of this or take control of the narrative or look better. Like, it was really interesting to watch the whole dynamic between like 3 or 4 people, that were pretty much, it was, Jules, Fluid Flows, and Amanda were the main people that were, and Brian, were all fighting over, influence in the organization, and the ambassadors, right? The developers, we've always just been like, whatever, we all vote, we do our thing, I never dictate to them, they do their thing, they come tell me what they need from me, I tell them what I need from them, and we work great. But the ambassadors have always been like, more dramatic. They're the ones that go out and be like, oh, Nexus is so great, so they're on social media, and like, everyone's like, yeah, Nexus is great, and they're like, oh, that means I must be great, and then, oh, wait, I must be greater than that person, oh, I should have more influence in that person, why did they have that? I want to get access to that, And so we had this natural thing that just kind of formed, the 30, 40 people over a number of years. And then it got to a point where I was like, okay, nobody's getting paid until we put this in. So here, join this group and vote on what you want to do. The things, the skills that you want to embody. And I think I put 20 different skills. And then that basically is how we created the first division of the 5 arms, right? Okay, you want to be here, you want to be here. So people voted to where they wanted to be, and then that created the 5 arms and the 5 groups. So then I created 5 subgroups from that, and then everybody joined that was, part of that group. And within 2 weeks, we had 3 moles, like people that had infiltrated the team to cozy up to somebody that they wanted to push their own agenda, and either consume resources or create a position to attack, or consume, influence things, through finding people they could influence and manipulate, and that would affect the larger organization. 3 moles that were voted out, like trying to centralize budgets. One guy wanted to use the funding to fund his use case to pay people to join his platform from the public funds. Like there was a lot of interesting dynamics.
I know why. Because they could. So you had to make it to where they couldn't.
Exactly. And they were pretty pissed off. Like they were really, there was a whole little group of people that was like, oh, the starfish, fuck the starfish, oh, the starfish, meh, because their plans were foiled within 2 weeks of launching it. It was really fascinating to watch how it just launched.
But when you did this, it was from observing what was going on and what you needed to do to kind of thwart that, and because you have people that are have more influence or access or leveling up or whatever it is, and people start going through them, and then you go, all right, I see what's going on here, and the desires and representation of these other people aren't getting so much. We need to make it to where they can. Once they had that kind of influence, they got rid of all the bad actors.
Kind of. So you had.
Well, explain that process of how these guys got voted off the island or whatever.
Well, so everybody has their own arm. So different number of people joined each different arm, and then the arms had to vote for a chair. Okay, a chair is the person that represents their arm in the group of 5, right? The group of 5 is more like budgets and strategies, higher level organizational strategies. Think of it as kind of like a little mini board, but it's bottom up. So that means the working group, the base group, which, in the launching it, we had about 40 people. So 5 times 8 is about 40. So about 8 people in each group. And then they elect a chair. So remember I was saying Jules, Fluid Flow, and Amanda were the main influencers, right? When it came to a vote, they didn't get elected. Fluid Flows was totally just like, I don't think he even got 1 vote. Like the only person that voted for him was the other person that got nominated, right? It was really interesting to watch. And these people that were in power were never actually in power. They just had the keys that they were controlling access to, but nobody saw them as somebody that they thought would represent them, right? These people just imposed themselves.
They weren't natural leaders. They were shiny badgers.
Yeah, and they used their whatever perceived influence by like being a person there before or whatever. Like I have the credentials to the social media account, or I have the access to the SIG chain, and they used that. None of them were voted. None of them were voted as chairs, right? And that started, and then then each group had to come up with strategies, what they were going to do. And during that process, 3 other people got voted out because they just weren't with the vibe. What it did is it created a precedence, I guess you could say. When you don't have a precedence in a social system, it's fucked. Okay, there needs to be a precedence set. That's the number one fundamental thing I found, is there needs to be a precedence of behavior, because that's what everything is measured against, right? If you don't have some reference point to measure against, then nothing is anything, right?
How large is this system now? You have all your,
It's still about 30, 40 people about right now
that are developing,
developers,
promoting,
about
representing. Was going on and what you needed to do to kind of thwart that, and because you have people that are have more influence or access or leveling up or whatever it is, and people start going through them, and then you go, all right, I see what's going on here, and the desires and representation of these other people aren't getting so much. We need to make it to where they can. Once they had that kind of influence, they got rid of all the bad actors.
Kind of. So you had.
Well, explain that process of how these guys got voted off the island or whatever.
Well, so everybody has their own arm. So different number of people joined each different arm, and then the arms had to vote for a chair. Okay, a chair is the person that represents their arm in the group of 5, right? The group of 5 is more like budgets and strategies, higher level organizational strategies. Think of it as kind of like a little mini board, but it's bottom up. So that means the working group, the base group, which, in the launching it, we had about 40 people. So 5 times 8 is about 40. So about 8 people in each group. And then they elect a chair. So remember I was saying Jules, Fluid Flow, and Amanda were the main influencers, right? When it came to a vote, they didn't get elected. Fluid Flows was totally just like, I don't think he even got one vote. Like, the only person that voted for him was the other person that got nominated, right? It was really interesting to watch. And these people that were in power were never actually in power. They just had the keys that they were controlling access to, but nobody saw them as somebody that they thought would represent them, right? These people just imposed themselves.
They weren't natural leaders. They were shiny badgers.
Yeah, and they used their whatever perceived influence by being a person there before or whatever. Like, I have the credentials to the social media account, or I have the access to the SIG chain, and they use that. None of them were voted. None of them were voted as chairs, right? And that started, and then each group had to come up with strategies, what they were going to do. And during that process, 3 other people got voted out because they just weren't with the vibe. What it did is it created a precedence, I guess you could say. When you don't have a precedence in a social system, it's fucked. Okay, there needs to be a precedence set. That's the number one fundamental thing I found, is there needs to be a precedence of behavior, because that's what everything is measured against, right? If you don't have some reference point to measure against, then nothing is anything, right?
How large is this system now? You have all your,
It's still about 30, 40 people about right now
that are developing,
developers,
promoting, representing.
I honestly, I don't know. Like, I don't track. Like, we're working on a directory where people can report, and when it gets fully coded on chain, we'll have a better idea of all of that. Like, there's some arms have groups of 13, some of them have just groups of 8. There's some arms that have 3 or 4 people, and then some have like 10 or 15 or 20, because you can. So basically, you get these groups of 8, and then some of those groups of 8 formed groups of 13. And then when you form that group, then you are automatically the facilitator of it for one cycle, which is a quarter, 3 months, and then you go for review, and somebody can nominate a challenger, and then you get swapped, and then you basically go down the stack. If you create a new group, then you become. So
the motivation for these people to participate in this is they have no friends and they're online all the time, or it's a game and it's kind of a sim and they're having fun doing it. There's some financial incentive, or they want to save the planet.
There's a lot. There's a mix. There's the financial incentive. There's the volunteer people. There's the passionate people. There's just the diehard nerds that just love the tech, and there's the social experimental people that are just experimenting with the no social architecture. I mean, it really. When I started thinking about it, just to kind of tangent a little bit, when I started designing this, I was just like, holy shit! Like nobody's reimagined social systems for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, even the United States, which is this new revolutionary republic, is really based mostly off of the Roman Republic, the Iroquois Confederation, and kings and monarchies, because the executive branch is just a new monarchy, right? And they even monarchies even had a parliament, to check and balance the king, so that's even the beginning of but it's really not much different than the time of Henry VIII.
What was the difference? Is it Colin or Colin plus tech? the capability of doing it the way you're talking about? You know, and is this, when you say it's scalable, is this going to be, you know, just a Buckminster Fuller to replace a system, just make them obsolete? I mean, that this is an anarchist, voluntarist, we're over here and screw you guys, which suits crap out of me, you know, just make it better. So is it, you know, it's going to be its own PMA kind of deal, which is why Philip is interested in, you know, if you can put this stuff into that structure. I wonder, what is the ultimate goal for a maximum scalability capability? What do you think is going to happen?
Poke holes in the system, like, you know, you
Swiss cheese the crap out of it with a 12 gauge.
Yeah, with PMAs, you pinhole it with PMAs. You put land under PMAs, so you can use this to manage cities. Essentially, you know, think about it. Your city has your main, you know, lawmakers, which, you know, create the contracts that you can execute. You know, those are the coders, and then you have your main people that execute on that, the people that enforce some of that. So if you have these groups, let's say there's 5 groups of 8 in the city that you live in, a population of a few thousand people. You know, let's say one of the groups is responsible for road maintenance. You know, let's say there's 8 groups of 13 involved in that one. You can go and be like, oh, hey, you know, I want to go, you know, on this district. You know, let's say that the city's broken up into 13 different districts. You go to that working group and you can be like, hey, you know, I see that there's, you know, an available slot. Like, can I get involved? And what happens is, instead of there being some higher level manager, some, you know, corporate dickhead that's making the call, it's those 12 people in that group to be like, okay, guys, well, what, do you guys like this guy? No? Yeah? Oh, okay, we like him. And then that group votes, and then they vote that guy in, right? And if there's somebody in the group that's like causing trouble and like being a dickhead, they vote him out, right? And when you're voted out, you're not voted out of the system, you're just voted out of that cell. You can go form another cell. You go jump into another cell, or, you know, if a cell needs to be regenerated and you get elected to be the person to regenerate it, you can do that too, right? So you become detached, and that's, you know, and you can go just join another place. So it's a self-organizing system.
Is there a minimum number that's needed? You know, we're doing, you know, we've developed, you know, since we talked last, we've gone down the road quite a bit. We're ready to launch, you know, when I get back from Anarchapulco, we're going to be doing Occupy the Land. You know, this is, so now I occupy. Even Philip, he's like, "Yeah, man, go show me the land." Yeah.
5
How many people? 5.
5 to start for a branch. It's your minimum, essentially.
5.
It's your governing board, essentially. And then those 5 people, you know, they create 5 groups of 8. And then when you create the group,
well, what happens when you don't have 8? I mean, you know, it's kind of,
you got 3, you got 2. I mean, we have some arms. There's like Impressions, I think, is the smallest one, and they have 3 or 4 people, right now. And I mean, it's just, it doesn't need to have 8. It can scale to any level. Your minimum is, I mean,
I want to change the law, and I don't know how to code. How I do that?
You want to change the log.
The law.
The law.
Code is law. Well, I want a law. I mean, code. I don't know how to code. How do I change a code?
Well, think of it as like a little toolbox of Legos for you. You know, so you'll be able to select contracts, and then the developers essentially create templated contracts so that you can just be like, oh, hey,
template. I want templates. Give me
templates. You just click your template, use it, done. So you don't have all this complicated coding like Ethereum and stuff. Like the lower level guys like me develop those contracts and standardize them, and then that's something that's available to you. So, you know, more people that develop it, becomes kind of like an open source code.
Okay, answer me this: when you have a multi-sig contract and you have these people that have to cryptographically, you know, vote or sign on to, you know, yada 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 yada. You know, how is that done? You know, and how does it trigger? Or there's an index. You know, when the temperature reaches 100 degrees, then we turn off the pump of the whatever kind of. We all decide. I'm going, yeah. Who said it is 100 degrees? Which sensor? Who's the validator of the data?
That's a really good question. I mean,
that's why I asked it.
Yeah, that is something that is still yet to be. I'm not fully comfortable with any of the architectures yet, in as far as interfacing with the physical world in like real, like a contract that's based off of some sort of sensor data, because the sensor data can be manipulated, and it requires some sort of hardware. I'm still mulling on how to do that correctly.
Well, it might be wisdom of the crowd thing, but that's why you need numbers. You know, this number is the number we're going to use to trigger this contract. So say at the 200 people. Yep. Okay. Then it's validated. But then you got to have the wisdom of the 200 people thing.
Yeah.
You see my point?
Checks and balances. I mean, when you're talking about sensor level data, you got to be specific with me. Sensor level data, That requires more thought as far as developing correct IoT devices that can, be protected against the manipulation of that in some way to standard. I'm not really into the oracles thing yet, like Chainlink and all of that stuff. It's just, I don't think it's matured enough yet to really say that it can be used, as smart contract feeds. I've saw more as like, if we're engaging in a peer-to-peer contract to say like, okay, Ernie, let's say we have a contract where, you've insured me for 100 degrees and, when the temperature goes over 100 degrees, you pay me for my AC unit or whatever, like just some stupid contract like that. That Oracle would be between us. The best thing that I found as far as solving that issue is not having global oracles. You have localized contract oracles, such as, okay, we've agreed on this sensor being our data point, and then we have, a mutual third party that's an arbiter that can come and be, a 2/3 multi-sig in case we get a deadlock.
Branch, so like, okay, I get it.
Right, so that way, like, you limit the scope of that data, which means that there's less potential to corrupt it, because there's less incentive to corrupt it, because it's just you and me. So it's either you can corrupt it, or I can corrupt it, or the arbiter, right? And generally speaking, like, when you want to engage in a contract that's based off of a price and you want to have that self-executing on-chain, we agree on a price mutually in our contract, and then we have
but from what index, what indicator, what exchange,
it
what
doesn't
bank?
matter. It doesn't matter, because what we can do is I can have a price feed that I input in my chain, and you can have one that you input in your chain, and you can have an average of them, or you can have a mutual arbiter. Or when you execute the contract, we could say, okay, we're agreeing, Ernest, that this contract is going to execute at 10 cents or 20 cents, right, as a mutual value, and then, there's a time expiration on that. So you just have a mutually agreed value at that point that then is just a single point. It's not like a global price feed that's constantly feeding the price and everything, because that just becomes so corruptible. Especially, remember, corruption.
Because that's going to turn right into some kind of arbitrage thing. It's
exactly.
going to be stocks.
And
it's
corruption wants to spread. So the more something can influence larger amounts of people, the more it's going to be corrupted. So you want to limit the scope of any of these things to smaller subsets of that, so that you don't have as much ability to corrupt it. Because we could have a contract with valued at $1,000, and it's rather than being $1 billion if it was on the global network as a price feed, we just have our own local one that we've agreed on, or we have an arbiter, so that you limit the scope, which limits the corruption's ability to spread out to the rest of everything. Right?
No, the contracts that you guys are talking about, are they, when you say they're self-actuating or whatever, the executing, is that the, just like, okay, it's been met, you need to pay me, Ernie, or is that like it's been met and the money just automatically goes from your account to the other account? Because, that would be pretty interesting. You have contracts that basically executed the actual transfer of funds without any human needed content. You couldn't contest it when it was met.
Well, that's what I was asking.
Money changed.
What's the criteria by which the trigger gets pulled?
You set it up in the contract. We'll
what?
We'll take the average of the if say it's precious metals, we'll take the average of these 6 markets, and if the average of these 6 markets hit this, executed. Whatever.
And the more data points that you have, the average, probably the better off it is, so one's not manipulated.
Hard to manipulate.
Well, when you get billions of dollars, man, they'd be manipulating as much as
still,
they can.
Caveat emptor. You put in the contract what you believe is going to make it fair. If you want 3 averages or 1,000 average,
And the more time that you have more opportunity for corruption too. If it's a 3-month contract,
it's hard to
it's harder, especially
the world.
if it's a local thing. But all right, so Bob had the same kind of basic question that I did, Colin. He goes, how does it self-execute? It gets triggered. Well, that's what we were talking about. There's some index, some average, whatever. It goes boom. But who pushes the button? Who clicks it? Who starts the process? How does it transfer funds? How does it, go?
Should be nobody pushing the button. It should just, when the criteria is met, boom, it does it.
Well, the way it's designed, we're getting into augmented contracts now. It's an asynchronous. So asynchronous means it can execute independently of one another. So we have an op execute, and then you have like a private or a public execution. So you can have something essentially auto execute based on some circumstance, or you can have something execute based on as kind of a call and response, right? So if I want to have, a contract that's related, let's say we've got a betting contract where we're, the decentralized exchange, for instance, that's done, that's working, that's being launched in this new update. Let's say we have tokens, there's a trading tokens, and you and me be like, okay, we're going to do a little trading bet or a horse race, that's logged on chain, we agree we want to watch this specific price feed. I'm going to say, hey, Ernie, if I beat you, if the price gets to this point, I earn money. We're both putting, $100 in. I get $200, if the price hits high, and you get $200 if the price hits low at a certain point. So that could be a self-executing asynchronous contract that's based off of some sort of circumstance that's on chain, right? We can have that. That's one method to do it, right? You have another one. Generally speaking, let's say we have a supply chain, right? We have a contract, which I call an arbitration triangle, where you buy something from me. Like, let's just do a standard market, right? I have something I've created. I've put it for sale on the market. You want to buy it. You put the coins up to purchase it, right? That goes into an arbitration contract. So you'll put it into that contract to say, okay, you'll transfer me this asset, which is the asset, the digital, NFT. You could consider it. Everything is a native NFT on Nexus, by the way. It's a register-based virtual machine. Actually, I just saw someone writing about that more recently. I think Cardano did that. Yeah. And Hoskinson was at our 2017 conference. He stole a lot of my ideas, the Cardano guy. He's a total dickhead. There's lots of people. No, seriously, there's lots of people that steal my
crypto,
ideas.
Right?
It's a stupid ADA, whatever. He copied BitShares and all the other stuff. But he stole my register architecture somewhat. But anyway, so anything's an NFT. So I create, some sort of work of art. It's got a certificate of authenticity. You basically see that certificate of authenticity for sale as a contract. I want 1,000 Nexus for it. You put the 1,000 Nexus into the contract. Then it has an arbitration requirement. So now we select an arbiter, which would be randomly selected from somebody that has a collateral, right? So somebody that has at least 1,000 or 2,000 Nexus in a collateralized contract. That acts kind of like a peer-to-peer Uber app, right? So you have a driver, they're driving around Tonopah, they say, oh, hey, or let's say Carefree, because that's where I am. Hey, I see that there's a package, there's, a 5%, I'm going to earn 50 Nexus for it. I have the collateral put up in my contract. I'm going to go pick this up. So they're going to, go into the arbitration contract when we create that sale. They're going to pick up the product from me. That asset or the proof of ownership is going to go into that arbitration triangle through the carrier. So they're not going to have actual cryptographic possession of it, but they're going to be a custodian of it, right? And their collateral that they have in that collateralized contract is going to be banked on whether you and me are happy, right? If we're both like, fuck that arbiter, he stole our package, 2,000 Nexus, 1,000 goes to me, 1,000 goes to you, right? He forfeits his collateral for stealing that value of an item, right? So he's going to have an incentive to want to deliver that to you and make you very happy and make me very happy. So, but also, if let's say, you don't like the product when it gets here, he can sign off with you since it's 2/3 multisig. That's an architecture I use a lot, 2 of 3. You can sign off with him to say, fuck you, Colin. I don't want your thing. This is not what you described and advertised to me. And then I'm out that. Then I forfeit the Nexus back to you, and then the contract reverses back to me, right? And then the guy takes his fee. But that fee comes from me. So that's like an example of like an arbitration contract, which would be executed based off of a physical action of somebody, right? Somebody transporting the item and then signing off with you. Right? Generally speaking, they would sign with the buyer because they're the one delivering to the buyer. The buyer's pleased. They sign off, and then when you both do your 2/3 multisig signature, now that asset, right, that NFT that represents the physical product, is going to officially transfer to you. You'll be able to claim it because Nexus it's got a dual accounting system. So like when with Bitcoin, you just send the coins and they're out there if you have the right address. With Nexus, you send a debit, but that has to be claimed. That debit has to be credited. So, with Nexus, for instance, like if you send to the wrong address or somebody forgets their password, the coins come back to you after a period of time, right? It's essentially it's an expiring
They have to be
contract.
claimed.
Right? They have to be claimed, right? So you if I send coins to you, for instance, and you set the expiration of the contract to a day, then you have a day to claim that credit. Otherwise, if you don't claim it within a day, then I can credit it back to myself. So, you add that accounting model in with like a transfer and a claim. You put a transfer in for, a certain amount of Nexus. That goes into the transfer and the debit, but the debit is not claimable and the debit is not creditable and the transfer is not claimable until that arbiter makes his signature, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So they're in no man's land. When you transfer the 1,000 Nexus into this contract, in this arbitration, I transfer the asset into it, And ideally, I'm going to claim the Nexus, or I'm going to credit the Nexus, and you're going to claim the asset. But it's
okay.
going to
Let's say it's not a digital asset. Let me give you an example.
the asset to represent a physical item, though. That's a huge distinction. It's going to be really important for managing supply chains and also creating order matching and having a type of system where you can have like a decentralized Etsy, where you have a certificate of authenticity for a specific item. Because when you have an NFT and then you have raw mineral supply chains that are fungible tokens, you could take my wood that I harvested from this forest that I have tokens issued to me for, and then carve it, and then I take this iron from the Grand Canyon or whatever, and you source all of these things and then transfer that into the NFT asset, so that that asset that I've created, this product for you, also has a transparent supply chain.
Okay,
Right?
okay, stop.
I just wanted to.
I almost understand what you're saying, and I know the audience is freaking heads exploding.